Well, a very warm welcome to After the Bell with myself, Dan Woodgate, as we review some of the absolutely unbelievable fights that went down here tonight at the K2 Arena in Crawley, West Sussex. And Dan, it's a new introduction to Quest the After the Bell. We did it last time out at Epsom. This time we're going to be talking about some of the unbelievable fights that happened here tonight. And I've got to say, every time you put a show on, you're worried as a promoter that are they going to deliver? Are the fights going to be good enough? Is the atmosphere going to be good? And you go into every show with that kind of hesitation. But tonight, it delivered and a little bit more. And I have to say, some fantastic fights.
Yeah, do you know what, Alan? Something that I always say, and I mention in commentary all the time, me and Steve Holdsworth, when we're commentating. And I just want to say, you're going to hear talking in the background, you're going to hear noise in the background because they're packing down. This is the end of the show, and this is what happens after the show. People everywhere. But like I said, Alan, me and Steve Holdsworth always mention it in commentary. The shows that you put on are second to none. And the matchmaking, the level of detail you go into getting the right fighters in for the right opponents. A lot of promoters are guilty of just throwing fighters in and just seeing what happens. I know you do your due diligence, but you're always going to worry. Have I done it right? Have I made the right choice with this one? Tonight, probably the best show I've seen with Quest.
Oh, thank you. Do you know what? It's really hard as a promoter and a matchmaker when you're looking at certain fights, and we always say it's never based on a paper record. It's based on the ability of what you see from an individual fighter, and whether that's from sparring or actual fight footage, going to the gym, seeing these fighters. Sometimes it's hard to get it right, but when you do get it right and you get two fighters going toe-to-toe, and that's not to say that you don't get early knockouts and stoppages. One fighter catches another fighter with a great shot. That's boxing. One punch can change a fight. But it is always a worry. But when the fights do go the way that they went tonight, and you get those toe-to-toe wars, you do get your knockouts. But it's a really, really satisfying feeling. And I've got to say, we'd be doing an injustice to Max Chart and Lee Cannon if we didn't concentrate on that fight first, because it was the main event here tonight at the K2 Arena. The British Super Middleweight champion Lee Cannon was taking on the former undefeated national light heavyweight champion Max Chart. There was so much hype around this fight. People talking about this fight, people saying, I just can't split them. And sometimes when there's that much anticipation about a fight, sometimes they never quite deliver. And I was really worried coming into this that would it live up to the hype? I want people to go away from this thinking, we saw something special. And for me, as a promoter and as a fight fan, I think it delivered and more.
Oh, without a doubt. And there's a few things I want to raise of potential concerns I had about this fight. So, as you said, as soon as I see this announced, I was like, this is going to be an absolute cracker. And then you start questioning, what if it isn't? What if this disappoints? And it would have been a huge disappointment if it didn't deliver. However, it did, but we'll get to that in a second. One thing that I was concerned about is that Lee Cannon openly come out and said, this is my last fight. I'm never fighting again. And for me, a lot of fighters, when they get in that position, they take their eye off the ball. Training camp doesn't go as it should do. They don't put the effort in. Not they don't put the effort in, but their heart's not in it. They know that there's nothing beyond this fight. When someone has a fight, whether they're fighting for their first ever fight or whether they're fighting for a world title, there's always, when I get this, what happens next? There is no what happens next for Lee. And it was concerning me that he was going to come out, and it did look a little bit like that was going to happen, didn't it? After that first round, he looked like he was in a bit of trouble, and I wasn't sure that he was going to be able to make it out for the second round, but that was to and fro. I had it going evens into the last round, and during commentary, Steve Holdsworth said to me, have you ever seen a better fight on Quest? And I went, well, you know what, Steve? Last time out, Max Chart fought Josh O'Brien in
Amazing.
What, for me, and I've openly said this, I've been to boxing shows all around the world. It was one of the best boxing fights I've ever seen live. When was that back in?
That was March of this year.
March of this year, yeah. So that was an unbelievable. I remember I chilled, and I talk about it now. I still get like little airs because it was an unbelievable fight. I think that might have topped it tonight. I think that might have topped it for action, but also for Lee's been around Quest for years.
He's the longest serving, as in boxer, that I've ever promoted. You know, I can remember when he started, he was a welterweight, and then he moved up to like middleweight. You know, so he's been there. Yeah. He's done it. He's got the T-shirt, won multiple titles. You know, he's had his wins, and he's also had his losses. And this is the thing that I was said in the build-up to this, that boxing is sometimes its own worst enemy when you talk about these golden O's where fighters are undefeated and they go through their careers, and then if there is a blip or if they do sort of stumble, then they're almost written off, and people are saying, oh, well, they couldn't have been that good. And that's with one loss. Yeah. I mean, it's happened so many times. I remember it happening to my all-time favourite fighter, Prince Nassim Hamed. You know, when he came unstuck against Marco Antonio Barrera, and then people were going, oh, you know, he's not that great of a fighter. Yeah, you know, he lost to Barrera, and it's just, well, you know, Barrera is an all-time great, you know, an unbelievable Mexican legend. And people are very, very quick to write fighters off when they lose. But my point, going back to it, is Lee Cannon has had some fantastic wins, and he's also had some painful losses throughout a career. But you saw in there tonight, if you were looking for value for money, if you were looking to come to a fight and be entertained with atmosphere, with action, and that, for me, like you say, was one of the best fights. And I've got to say, if I was previewing or reviewing, I should say, that fight and breaking it down over the 5 rounds, I thought Chart came out very strong in the first round. He looked like he was sort of landing some good power shots. It was a bit of an unusual start because Max came out and he was very, very aggressive, but he was standing in the pocket. And that was one thing I worried about is, you know, I wanted to see Max box and move. I wanted to see him stick to that game plan and, you know, use his boxing ability. But I knew Lee was obviously the overhand right, the power shots. And it was a little bit kind of frantic in the first minute, but I gave Max the first round. Yeah. Then coming into the second and the third, I gave those to Cannon. I thought Cannon was landing the more eye-catching, the more powerful shots. But that said, there were a couple occasions in that fight where Lee Cannon either looked like he was just fading, he was hurt, he bent over, and I thought, do you know what? If Max steps on the front foot, puts his combinations together here, he could force the stoppage because Lee looked like he was almost exhausted in there, and I thought, this is Max's opportunity. But credit to Lee Cannon, you cannot take anything away from the fact that even when he looked hurt, he came back firing. Even when he looked tired, even when he sustained the cut and he was kind of biting down on his gum shield, he came back punching. And like you said, you could have gone into that thinking, well, like you say, it's my last fight. Am I really prepared to go to the well? Am I really prepared to do what I need to do to kind of tough this out and bite down on my gum shield, fire back, because he knew it was his last fight. And credit to Lee Cannon because he did that and more. And I think at the end of it, I sat there thinking, I honestly wouldn't like to be a judge in this fight because both of them have had their moments in the fight. Yeah. Both of them have landed big shots. And I just really thought this is going to be a hard one to give to either of them. Yeah. And then you have the old argument, has he done enough to take the title away from the champion? Yeah. Has he ripped it away from him? And if I'm honest, you know, I'm going to sit on the fence here, you know, I'm going to say I thought a draw was a fair result, but, you know, what did you think?
Steve Holdsworth called the draw, sitting ringside. I actually had it to Chart, and I mentioned it on commentary. I said, Chart by a round, possibly 2, because there was a round that I gave to Lee Cannon, but it was a close round. I can't remember exactly how my scoring went, but I think it was Chart, Cannon. That's how I scored it, but you scored the third round, and that's a testament to how close the fight was. You scored the third round actually to Cannon, so for me, I had the other way round, but I think the third round was the one what I thought was close. Mm-hmm. I know it might have been the fourth round what I thought was close, maybe possibly a draw. So that's how I got this possibly a point or maybe 2 points to Chart. I thought Chart, and I spoke to Lee Cannon afterwards, and he said, "Yeah, I thought a draw. What did you think?" I said, "No, I thought Chart won the fight." I'm not up in arms about it. It's not a decision where I go, "Oh, it's disgusting." I genuinely think Chart won the fight. Before the fight, me and Steve were sitting and we were going, who's your money on? Who's your money on? I was like, I haven't got a clue, mate.
And I was the same. You know, coming into this, I've promoted both of them for a long time. And when you know the fighters and you know them well, it's hard to be impartial in the fact that I like both of them, and there wasn't one that I was thinking, oh, I hope so and so wins, or that wouldn't be professional. But also, I just thought this could go either way. I think for Max Chart, obviously, I don't think he's got plans to retire, and for Lee Cannon, I do think that for him that is potentially the end. Even though, as a promoter and as a fan, you could say, God, wouldn't that be good to see that one more time when both are healed up? I know Max got a bit of a shoulder injury in the fourth. Lee had the cut. And you've got to ask yourself, am I prepared to put myself, my friends, my family, myself through that all over again, even though it was such an unbelievable fight and you had like people standing in that arena screaming, applauding, it's a tough one.
That 10 minutes in there, they would have loved every single second of that. It's not that 10 minutes in there that will be putting him off making a comeback or fighting again. It'll be the 10 weeks prior to that 10 minutes that he's going to be going, do you know what? I've been there myself, Alan. When I retired from boxing, a few times I'm going to make a comeback. And then I sort of start putting myself through like what would be like a training camp. And then I get a couple of weeks in, I'm like, actually, I'm not cut out for this anymore.
But that's
it's just not there. Like and I said to Lee Cannon, he came up to me, he was having a good chat after the show, and he was like, I was like, got to have a rematch now, jokingly. And he was like, and I went, listen, it's done. Leave it. I know you're not going to be happy with me saying that to you.
No. Listen, at the end of the day, you've got to have a duty of care towards fighters. Neither of them sort of are young spring chickens, and
but neither are over the hill either.
But neither are over the hill.
They've got more fights in them, but let's leave it like that. Like
absolutely,
Lee Cannon, from a physical perspective, 100% he can go on and he can dominate the majority of fighters out there. He's one of the best fighters that Quest has seen throughout the years. And Max Chart, again, one of the best fighters. And the fact that you've brought them two together at a weight division that Max Chart used to box at cruiserweight. And he's come down to super middleweight and performed like that tonight. My concerns, that was another one of the concerns, that he's come down to this weight. Is he going to be able to perform at that level of intensity that we know that Lee Cannon's going to ask him to perform at? And he done it. Genuinely, that fight there was something that you don't see very often. No. Like, there's a lot of pride on the line, and obviously Lee's got a lot of history inside Quest. Max Chart, he's sort of building a profile for himself. Well, he's built the profile and he's trying to build on top of that now and trying to expand that profile, going through 3 different weight divisions. There's a lot on the line and there's a lot of pride on the line. And you would have forgiven them both for coming out and not putting it all on the line there, but they held nothing back. They come out and they go their absolute all. And genuinely, and like we've already mentioned, but I can't go over how much of a good fight it was. Every single person in that venue was on their feet. I've stood up and give a standing ovation to a few of the fights that you put on. You always put on really good fights, and pretty much every show there's one where I think, do you know what, this deserves a standing ovation. Steve Holdsworth, my co-commentator, he's not always as kind. He was on his feet tonight after that fight, and that was a testament to what we see unfold in front of us in that venue, just behind us there. It was an amazing night of boxing there.
It was unbelievable. We're going to sort of cover a few of the other sort of. I think we'll stick with the title fights, even though there were some great performances on the undercard as well. So a quick mention. You had Simeon Dennis up against Matt Hilliker for the vacant regional cruiserweight title, and I've got to say, career best performance from Simeon Dennis by a country mile tonight. He looked sharp, he looked focused, he looked like he had that little bit of needle. And coming into this fight, I honestly thought it was going to be Matt Hilliker, who showed in his last fight at the York Hall against Ty Saunders what a beast he was. Yeah. And, on this occasion, Hilliker, he just didn't get going. I could hear his corner screaming, saying, you've got to throw your shots, Matt. You've got to throw your shots. He was walking forwards with that high guard, tucked up, peekaboo kind of style, looking to get into range to land those big shots. And I've got to say, he just never got his shots off. And Simeon Dennis looked sharp. He looked vicious, and a fantastic win for him.
Yeah. Well, you said I've got to say it was his best performance so far. And if you wouldn't have said it, I would have said it. That's the best we've seen Simeon Dennis by an absolute country mile. He, in the past, has been guilty of being a bit casual, a bit maybe lazy is a bit harsh, but a bit casual.
I think he lacked, for me, and I said this in the build-up to the fight, he almost seemed to switch off and sometimes maybe looked like he doubted his own ability. Like, it just, you saw what it meant to him afterwards when he dropped down onto his knees, onto the canvas, and he was like, you could see the real emotion in his face. But it was almost like his coming-of-age fight where he realised that he did have all the tools, all the attributes, all the skills to become a champion and win.
Yeah.
And he did so well. And I think, commiserations to Matt Hilliker. I don't know where he goes from here. There's obviously plenty of good fights at cruiserweight, but it's
that's not the end of Matt Hilliker. One thing I want to point out is, and I said it in commentary as well, is that those two fighters, Matt Hilliker, Simeon Dennis, the first thing I said, as soon as the first bell went, I said, Matt Hilliker has got all the tools to be a problem for Simeon Dennis. Mm-hmm. He is perfectly made to cause Simeon Dennis loads of trouble.
Yeah.
But Simeon Dennis has got all the tools and perfectly made to cause Matt Hilliker loads of troubles. And I think, after watching that tonight, I think it would have always been a completely one-sided fight if it would have swung either way.
Either way, yeah.
Tonight was Simeon Dennis's night. He was phenomenal tonight. Unbelievable. Like we said, the best we've ever seen in box. We know he's got bags of talent. We know he's a very good boxer. We've not always seen it. And he's put on a performance there against a guy who's very imposing, very intimidating. And as we've seen, can bang a bit as well. But he just did not get anything off on Simeon Dennis tonight. And one thing that we must point out, it was only, 18 months ago, a couple of years ago, we were sitting ringside, and I mentioned this, we were sitting ringside, waiting for Simeon Dennis to be walked into the ring, doing his ring walk. All of a sudden it come over that he'd been rushed off to hospital.
Absolutely,
We thought he was being rushed to hospital and potentially dying. He was it was a suspected stroke. He was in a bad way. And he's gone from that to putting on a performance like that. That is a testament to him as a man and him as a boxer, the skills, the ability, but also the determination to come back from what many people would have gone, that is me done with boxing.
Could have called it a day easily.
Yeah, 100%.
So, amazing. Congratulations to Simeon Dennis and commiserations to Matt Hilliker. I'm going to jump onto the next one because I've got to say, this was a fight that I was really looking forward to for a number of reasons, and it was the vacant regional light cruiserweight title showdown between Morgan Keane, who we saw in action against Brian Turner at the Epsom Downs racecourse back in April with an unbelievable highlight reel knockout performance over Turner. And I know Brian Turner is probably, he messages me on social media going, please stop replaying when are you going to get bored of it? Brian, I promise, we're done now. It's like we're moving on. But Keane was up against Richard McKeever, who the show's fans didn't really know too much about. I'd seen footage of him, I'd seen fight footage, I'd seen him sort of in action, and I knew he was a very talented, a very dangerous fighter. What transpired in there was, unfortunate with the fight having to be stopped because of damage to, I think it was McKeever's right eye that he took some punishment to, and the doctors pulled him out.
And it was real bad cut. I actually spoke to the doctor afterwards because I see it earlier, like way before they called it off, and I said there's some damage to his eye. It looks really bad. It looks horrific. And it looked like his actual eyeball was bleeding. Thankfully, it wasn't his eyeball. I thought they were going to turn around and he was going to go, I'm blind, I can't see my eye. That's the sort of thing that can happen in this. It's a real dangerous sport that people don't really take into account. But
of course,
luckily it was a cut, but in a really horrible position. So the blood was going straight into his eyeball. That's why it looked like it was his eyeball, because his whole eyeball was just filled with blood. And what the doctor said to me afterwards, he went, I had to stop the fight because where that position was, if any more punishment, if that would have opened up, his eye would have been at risk of vacating his body. Yeah. And I know it sounds horrific. I know people are going to watch, that's a bit much. But that is... Well, again... And he wanted to carry on.
I spoke to him afterwards and I said, listen...
Yeah.
disappointing. You know, you've trained so hard for that fight, and I know how much you wanted it, and I know how confident he was. But you know, you'll live to fight another day. But we've got to make sure that everything is okay with you, and that's the most important thing. So, you know, congratulations to Morgan Keane. You know, I know that they spoke afterwards and they wanted to run it back, and Keane was like, "Yeah, not a problem at all." And hopefully, as I say, I know Richard's gone to get that eye seen to and properly checked out in hospital. So, yeah, I think it was really, really warming up to be an unbelievable fight. And I think, you know, had it gone on, I think it could have been another contender for fight of the night, but we'll never know.
Apologies about the graphic detail, but I want to touch on something else in that fight. Like you said, you've seen McKeever. We hadn't seen anything about McKeever. Sometimes we turn up and we're sitting ringside and we go, we don't really know until we see what they come out with. As soon as he set up, I was like, this kid's good. He knows boxing. And it was... From the second I see him set up in front of Morgan Keane, I was like, this is going to be a tough fight for Keane. However, Morgan Keane boxed perfectly in that first round. He was in, letting his hands go, because what McKeever was trying to do was catch him with the counters. And it's really difficult. And this is what, for me, Morgan Keane could have been guilty of going out and looking for the jab, just looking for that one shot. Against the counter puncher, how McKeever was setting up, it's really difficult to do that. Get him with one shot, you have to come in flurries, and that's exactly what Morgan Keane done. And I mentioned it in when we was the link before the fight. I mentioned it that Morgan Keane has got the potential to be a face. He's got the potential to be someone that can really build a profile on Quest. He's a very, very good fighter. He's a really nice lad. He's got a wonderful smile. He's like, well, he's a promoter's dream.
I've got his phone number.
So have I actually. I speak to him quite often. He's but you know, he's a real good guy, and he's got bundles of talent already. But also so much room for improvement as well.
And he's got that bit of needle in his work as well. When you look at him, when he throws his shots, some fighters, you know, they throw the shots and you can see that they've got power, but he's got that little bit of an edge that when he throws his shots, you know when they talk about, you know, he's throwing shots with bad intentions. He's a lovely guy, but when he throws those shots, he's throwing those shots to hurt you.
You can see when he's doing it, he enjoys it as well.
And I know that his Brian Turner was here ringside tonight, and he was sort of saying, "I'll be ready for him next year." But you know, it's a great fight. Congratulations, obviously, to Morgan Keane. He is the new regional light cruiserweight champion, and we look on to some of the other fights. So, you know, when you look back on this card, this is the thing. There were so many talking points, so many good fights to actually sort of to look back on and go, do you know what? You're right. That was a really, really good fight. I mean, a quick one. There's not much to sort of say about it, but Ben Taylor,
I knew you were going to say that,
blowing away Dean Conroy in unbelievable fashion. I mean, you know, blink. When they say don't blink, that literally was don't blink. If you turned away and the fight was over, and you know, I thought that fight was going to be a much harder fight for. I knew Taylor was good, and I know Conroy was so up for this fight. But that said, you know, it's you know.
Do you know what, Alan? I got up and after the fight, I was like, right, I'm gonna quickly nip to the toilet in between fights. And as I come out, you were sort of, you was like, what happened there? And you was like, and it's a testament to how much you care about your job and how much you care about what you do. You was panicking that, oh, was that a massive mismatch? We'll put them together and I've done it. I was like, no. I said, Taylor, just come out and just, like, Conroy didn't have a chance to do anything. And it's not because he's not good enough. It's not because Taylor's like 10 times better than him from a technical perspective. It's because Taylor come out and just went, I'm going to stop you in the first 15, 20 seconds of this fight. And there's nothing you can do about it. And I don't think, with the way that Taylor approached that fight, there's not many fighters out there at any level that would have been able to stand up to the barrage of punches that he put together. Like you say, there's not a lot to say about it, but that was some, like, I think it was, did Conroy go down, got back up and then just got, that was the end of it. It was unbelievable, like he just come out with intent, come out knowing what he wanted to do. I mean, God knows what would have happened if Conroy would have lasted for more than 30 seconds. But no, and there was nothing wrong with the matchmaking. I know you was panicking about that, but there was nothing wrong with the matchmaking. Taylor just didn't want to hang around tonight.
Yeah, well, like I say, a great performance then, and like I say, in our final bout of the night, there's still more to cover, but you know, Salah, Edin, Triple M Busick, it's quite a mouthful. but he deserves to be announced the way he wants to be announced because, he's burst onto the scene. This season, he's beaten Muhammad Yakubi to win the national featherweight title. He then obviously went up in weight and he beat Seb Hallett to win the national lightweight title, gained revenge. He drops back down to super featherweight tonight, facing a very, very talented fighter who came all the way down from Wakefield, Luke Granger, who's been on the circuit, talented kid, has won sort of fights and belts up at higher weights.
25 wins.
Yeah, and this was a dangerous fight. And great start for Busick. He had Granger down, but he was asked questions in that fight that he hasn't been asked before. Because Granger was a good boxer, and when Granger had space to actually throw his shots, and Busick wasn't on him, wasn't pressuring him, Busick was getting caught. And he had to adjust, and he had to find something that he hadn't found before, because both with Hallett and Muhammad Yakubi, in my opinion, watching those fights, I didn't see Busick have to answer the sort of the pressure questions. He was taking some shots. Like I said, Granger is a classy operator, and Busick, obviously, he retains his titles. It was a great performance, but it wasn't an easy night's work for him.
No, do you know what? I think we got to the end of the fight, and I said something very similar. Is that I actually scored every single round to Busick, but that wasn't a true reflection of what happened and what unfolded in front of us. In the first round, as soon as I see Luke Granger stand and get in his stance, start trying to let his shots go, I was like, this kid's good, he's tidy. He knows his way around the ring, he knows what he's doing there. Busick, his pressure, punching is relentless. He just does not stop. But one thing that he does differently from other pressure fighters, every single shot he throws, he thinks about. How he does it so quick, I do not know, because he literally picks his shots as he's going, and you can see his mind ticking away, boom, 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 boom. It was an unbelievable performance from him. Put Granger down in the first round, and you thought, that's it, Granger's done. All of a sudden, Granger held on, and the second round was much of the same, but Granger held on. And the third round came, and towards the back end of the third round, me and Steve sort of looked at each other, and we was like, "Oh, is this turning into something?" And it did turn into something. Unfortunately for Luke Granger, it was too little, too late. And Busick, testament to him, his fitness and his desire to win, he just went out and just kept throwing shots. And he didn't look ragged. He didn't look like he was just going wild. At any point, he stayed controlled the whole way through.
He's got an unbelievable engine, hasn't he?
It's ridiculous.
And I'll tell you one thing that I found with Busick, he's from Kingston upon Thames and Surrey, but originally from Morocco. And when you talk to him and you ask him why is he sort of fighting, it's like, I'm doing this for my legacy, for my people, for my country. There's an unbelievable pride that his sort of, obviously originally from Morocco, but he's almost like he's not fighting for himself sometimes. He's fighting for a country. He's fighting for pride. He's fighting for so much more than just, well, I want to be a champion and I want to win. There's something different about him, and I think that is a very, very powerful thing to have in his arsenal, that he's got a great engine. He throws shots. He keeps throwing shots. He comes through. He can take a shot as well. And he's walked through a few big shots in that fight tonight. But it's that fact that, I'm doing this for my legacy, as he puts it, for my people. And I think he's going to be hard to beat. And for what it's worth, I know there's a lot of people wanting to fight him again. So I know Seb Hallett is prepared to drop down to 9-4 to fight him again. I know Dexter Houghton, former British lightweight champion, who lost his title last time out, he said, I want to drop down to 9-4 to fight him. There are some big, big fights out there for him, but equally, be careful what you wish for, because he's shown in there tonight that he can fight a taller, rangier boxer mover. He's faced the likes of Muhammad Yakubi, who is a box fighter who comes forward similar sort of size and stature to him. He's boxed Seb Hallett again, who was a tall, rangy fighter. So he's boxed a variety of different people in the competition, and he's looked good against them. So, like I say, great performance from Salah Busick. Where he goes, we'll find out in the next week or so.
After they've watched that fight, Houghton and Hallett, I think they might change their mind. I would not want to get in the ring with that man. The thing is, like, I used to love a pressure fighter coming to me. I was a counter puncher, so I was like, yeah, brilliant. I'll bring it on because I can just pick you off. He's much more than just a pressure fighter. He moves his head really well. He comes at awkward angles. He spins round the angle. He finds angles that other fighters just don't find. He lets his hands go. And he's a thinking fighter as well. He's a combination for just an absolute nightmare for anyone that gets in the ring with him. And I'm glad that I've never been a super featherweight.
Super featherweight.
Yeah, I'm glad that I'm not a super featherweight because I might have to.
I'm not sure that ship ever sailed. Or,
I was born at super feather.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then finally on the title side of things, we've got to give a mention to Alex Stockley. Yeah, he wins the regional heavyweight title against Dave Ain't Stoppin' Choppin', who was a late replacement. Stockley originally scheduled to face Kashif Chowdhury. Chowdhury was ruled out with a really sort of nasty shoulder injury, a rotator cuff injury that ruled him out of the fight. In steps Dave Choppin, who, I've got to say with Dave Choppin, credit where credit's due. When you say to Dave Choppin, I need a heavyweight, are you up for it? You're fighting Alex Stockley, undefeated, no hesitation. He will fight anybody. And to be honest with you, I actually thought coming into this fight, Choppin was going to make it hard work for Alex Stockley because Alex Stockley blew Leighton Gronow away, had a tough fight against Isaac Gibbs. He's not the biggest heavyweight, and I knew that Dave, in terms of sort of physicality, was much bigger and heavier than Alex Stockley. And it turned out kind of how I thought it was going to turn out, that Stockley was going to throw the kitchen sink at Choppin. He was going to throw everything that he had at him, but he didn't have the power to put a dent in Dave Choppin. And Dave Choppin kept walking forward, kept walking through those shots, wasn't busy enough. If he'd had a little bit more of preparation, I think it might have been different. But, still a hard night's work for Alex Stockley, and questions were asked. And it'll be interesting now with Stockley to see where he goes from that, because if he was in with maybe Kashif Chowdhury, I think Chowdhury would have been a hard night for him, a very, very tough fight for him. And, Stockley did well to win the fight, but it's going to be interesting to see where his journey goes.
Chowdhury is a complete different fight from Choppin. You've done really well to get an opponent at late notice like that that's going to come in and fight someone who's been relatively impressive. Alex Stockley, good fighter, big, strong lad. He's not a heavyweight. I was chatting to him before the fight, and he was like, I'm thinking about going down to cruiser. Do that, because he's got speed. He's only short, but he's got speed. He's got power. At cruiserweight, he is a force to be reckoned with. Because he'll be faster than the majority of cruiserweights. He'll punch as hard as most of them. He will be a force to be reckoned with because he's a good boxer as well. And he said in this fight he's actually leaned out a little bit because you can see he's a big muscular lad, but he's lost a bit of muscle. He said his punches are bit more fluid, and we see that tonight. He was letting his hands go, but it was evident very early on that he was not going to make a dent in Chopping. And there's a 5 stone, 30 kilo in heavyweights. It doesn't matter what weight you are. If you're above 91 kilos. You can fight anyone up to 200 kilos. And I'm not saying Chopping was that big, but there was a massive weight difference. And against a heavyweight his size, Stockley can hold his own. But you put him in against Chopping, who's had 6 weeks to prepare for the fight, has been in the gym, and not had a phone call 11 days before the fight, I think you possibly get a different outcome. Because Chopping would fancy that fight. And I spoke to Chopping after the fight, and he was like, they've called on. They said they want a bit of a rematch because obviously Stockley's not 100% happy with his performance. I don't think that's the best idea for Stockley. I wouldn't go that route with him. No. I would look to slowly edge him down towards cruiserweight. Get him. I'd have a word with, if I was his coach, his manager, whatever he's doing, I'd have a word with you and say, look, let's get some heavyweights in, or some cruiserweights that can't be bothered to make the weight or are not too fussed about making the weight, and get them in at like 95, 96 kilos, and then bring him down and go 94, 93 kilos, and then get him down to the cruiserweight limit. And I think that's where his future lies. I think if he wants to be someone with longevity in the sport and in quest boxing, I think cruiserweight's where it lies. And it's not me slating. I'm a big fan. I've known Alex Stockley. He reminded me, actually, when I boxed for the Grange Boxing Club over in Birchington. He was there then, so he must have only been a little pup then. And so I've known him for a long time, and I think a lot of his team, Conor Gorham's his coach. He's got a real good gym down in Broadstairs and turned out some real good fighters, as we've seen. Got
Absolutely,
a few of them on the show now. And sort of Margate and like Thanet as a whole sort of took a bit of a back step, didn't they? Like they used to be a big force to be reckoned with on the
Absolutely,
Quest
yeah.
Boxing.
I mean, you used to have sort of so many gyms down there. You had some big stars like Sam Holloway, Aaron Lowry. The gym down there, it was O'Neill's gym.
O'Neill's gym.
You know, they had some great fighters down there. So yeah, I mean, plenty more fighters to come out of that. And
Thanet's brilliant for boxing, and I want to see more Thanet boxers on Quest because they are the sort of fighters that come in. They bring a crowd. They come to win. And they come to put on a good performance. Alex Stockley's that type of fighter. I think, but like I say, I think his future lies at cruiserweight.
Absolutely. It's like I say, we could talk all night. There were some unbelievable fights on the undercard. No titles on the line, but special mention to Luke Radcliffe making his Quest debut. Great performance against Charlie Lowe. A good performance against Liam Sayers as well. You know, stopping Ty Morey. And you know, the list goes on. There were some great fights, but we've probably taken up way too much time backstage. It's been a little bit noisy. I'm not going to lie. There's been a lot of background noise, but everybody wants to go home. There's people looking at us going, can you hurry up? So that is unfortunately all we've got time for. But, you know, it's great to talk about the fights. You know, that's what After the Bell is all about. We talk about the fights, we give our opinion, and we look ahead to some much, much bigger nights as well. So, as I say, that's all we've got time for. But Quest is back on Saturday, November the 18th, Epsom Downs Racecourse in Surrey. It's called The Last Dance. It's a show that's going to be headlined by Ami Rahman, the British light middleweight champion, in his rescheduled fight against Hassan Mohammed. It's a great fight in prospect with some other unbelievable fights to be announced next week. So, as I say, that's all we've got time for. Dan, it's always a pleasure. And as I say, this is After the Bell. This is Quest Boxing League. I hope you've enjoyed it.